Morning, all. All right, so in my season by season look at the National Hockey League, we're up to the 1986 1987 season. And if you look at the Adams, Hartford's number one. They finished with 93 points that year, 43-30-7 record, 287 goals scored, 270 goals against. They're coached by Jack Evans at that point. They win the division by 1 point over the Montreal Canadiens, who finished with a 41-29-10 record, so 92 points for them. 277 goals scored, 241 goals against. Jean Perron is the coach there. You'll also notice as I go through the goal totals, goals are coming down. We're getting into the later 80s. The goal totals do start coming down. Boston 39-34-7 record, so 85 points for them. 301 goals scored, 276 goals against. Butch Goring coaches them to a 5-7-1 record. Terry O'Reilly then takes over and has a record of 34-27-6 behind the bench. So it gets better after Terry O'Reilly takes over. Quebec, 31-39-10 record for 72 points. As Quebec starts to fall, and it's going to get ugly quickly here. They have 267 goals. They allow 276 goals. Michel Bergeron, still the coach in Quebec at that point. Buffalo misses the playoffs and they bottom out. 64 points for them, a record of 28-44-8, 280 goals scored, 308 goals against. They have three different coaches that year. They're 3-7-2 under Scotty Bowman. They are 4-15-2 under the recently retired Craig Ramsey, and 21-22-4 under Ted Sater. So, three different coaches in Buffalo, kind of a rough season. Philadelphia, still coached by Mike Keenan, of course. 46-26-8 record, 100 points, 310 goals scored, 245 goals against. The Washington Capitals, they have 86 points on the strength of a 38-32-10 record, 285 goals scored, 278 goals against. Brian Murray, still the coach there. The New York Islanders, 35-33-12 record, 82 points, scoring 279 goals, allowing 281. Terry Simpson was the coach that year. Al Arbor had been promoted, and so Terry Simpson takes over as the coach. The New York Rangers go through three coaches that year as well. 34-38-8 record, 76 points, 307 goals scored, 323 goals against. Ted Sater goes 5-10-4 behind the bench. Tom Webster goes 5-9-4 behind the bench, and then GM Phil Esposito behind the bench has a record of 24-19. So they get their best hockey underneath the general manager, which can happen. When the guy who can trade you is behind the bench, you might play a little better. The Pittsburgh Penguins missed the playoffs again, but they're getting better. 72 points for them, a record of 30-38-12 under coach Bob Berry. They score 297 goals. They allow 290. Things are still not great for New Jersey, but there's incremental improvement. 64 points, a record of 29-45-6. 293 goals scored, 368 goals against. They're coached by Doug Carpenter. We go out west, and nobody in the Norris has a winning record. The St. Louis Blues do win the division with a record of 32-33-15, so 79 points. They score 281 goals. They allow 293. The Detroit Red Wings a close second with 78 points, a record of 34-36-10 under coach Jacques Demers. So we have Jacques Martin and Jacques Demers atop the Norris division. 260 goals scored for Detroit, 274 goals against. The Chicago Blackhawks finished third, a record of 29-37-12, or 14, I should say, so 14 ties, 72 points. Bob Pulford, the coach there, 290 goals scored, 310 goals against. The Toronto Maple Leafs make the playoffs on the tiebreaker against Minnesota, that tiebreaker being more wins, a record of 32-42-6. 286 goals scored, 319 goals against for 70 points overall. John Brophy is the coach in Toronto at that point. Minnesota, again, does miss the playoffs. They finished 30-40-10, 70 points. 296 goals scored, 314 goals against. The record under Lorne Henning, 30-39-9. Glenn Sonmore coaches the team for 2 games. They go 0-1-1 in those 2 games. The Smythe division, once again, is the realm of the Edmonton Oilers, but Calgary's getting close. Edmonton finishes with 106 points, which is the lowest point total of a number one team in the NHL since, I think it was 1970 was the last time it was that low. But again, this is what I grew up with. So the amount of 100-point teams that we have now in the NHL to me is kind of ridiculous. And it takes away that feeling of, hey, this team had 100 points. It used to feel important. And like that team was, had a great year. They got to 100 points. But at any rate, 50-24-6 record for the Oilers. 372 goals scored, 284 goals against under coach Glenn Sather. The Calgary Flames, 46-31-3 record, 95 points, 318 goals scored, 289 goals against. Bob Johnson, the coach in Calgary. The Winnipeg Jets go 40-32-8, so an 88-point season for them under coach Dan Maloney. 279 goals scored, 271 goals against. The LA Kings, they finished 31-41-8, 70 points, 318 goals scored, 341 goals against. Pat Quinn, who we're going to talk about in this one, 18-20-4 record as coach. Mike Murphy takes over, 13-21-4 record for him. The Vancouver Canucks missed the playoffs because they're just not good. 66 points, 29-43-8 record under coach Tom Watt. 282 goals scored, 314 goals against. So again, if you've been watching this series, you can start to see why, as a kid and then as a teenager, I needed other teams to root for because the Canucks, they just weren't getting there. All right, so the New York Rangers, their general manager, as I previously stated, was Phil Esposito. He makes 19 trades in a year. A lot, known as Trader Phil for that reason. And as you can see, too, from the coaching records, he wasn't shy about making a change behind the bench when he felt it was needed. The first round was made best of 7 this year. So they get away from best of 5 because they wanted to get away from upsets. Let me know how that works out for you. Upsets are going to happen no matter how many games you have in the series. If a top seed just isn't bringing their top game, adding that extra game doesn't necessarily make a difference. So they do make it best of 7. It stays that way until now. But the idea that when it's best of 5, it's too easy to see upsets. I mean, on some level, sure. But again, if a team is bound and determined to choke. June 6th of 1986 is the start of me becoming a Vancouver Canucks and Boston Bruins fan. The Canucks trade Cam Neely in a 1987 first-round draft pick, which became Glenn Wesley, to the Bruins for Barry Peterson. At the time, this trade made perfect sense. Barry Peterson was a scoring center. He'd had a couple of 100-point seasons, and Vancouver desperately needed depth down the middle. Cam Neely was a good young winger, but there was some debate about whether or not he was ever going to be a really, really good player at the NHL level. And of course, he gets to Boston, and he becomes a pretty darn good power forward for the Boston Bruins. And again, that's where I start saying, these Bruins are kind of fun to watch. So 86-87 is where it starts. And then once Andy Moog leaves Edmonton and goes to Boston, that really cinches it. So March 10th of 1987, the Kings trade Marcel Dion to the Rangers for Tom Laidlaw and Bobby Carpenter. Seeing Dion getting traded, an absolute shocker, but it would be overshadowed, a year later when Wayne Gretzky ends up going to the LA Kings. And April 9th of 1987, the Oilers score a playoff record for goals against those LA Kings. 13-3 win over LA. So Dion got out before that game took place. April 12th of 1987, the Habs eliminate Boston for the 18th straight meeting between the two teams. It's a bad matchup for Boston. Again, 18. Going back to, I believe it was 1940. So it's a lot. It's a lot. And so they met each other 18 times over 40-some years, and every single time Montreal won. So, yeah, that's how that works. February 6th of 1987, Mike Bossy scores his 30th goal. 10 straight 30-goal seasons to start his career, which sets a new NHL record. And again, shows that Mike Bossy, one of the best goal scorers of all time. Absolutely. April 4th of 1987, Denny Potvin becomes the first defenseman to reach 1,000 career points. Bobby Orr would have if his knees didn't go out on him, but still Denny Potvin gets to be that first one to 1,000 points, and that's part of the reason why he's a first ballot Hall of Famer and all the Stanley Cups and all the just trophies. April 9th of 1987, Wayne Gretzky gets his 177th career playoff point to pass Jean Beliveau for the number 1 spot. It is worthy of note that at the time Jean Beliveau was playing in the playoffs, there were fewer playoff rounds, so he would have had more playoff points, but Gretzky would have passed him eventually anyways. Gretzky's playoff records are pretty darn near as ridiculous as his regular season records. So Pat Quinn. Pat Quinn signs a contract with the Vancouver Canucks while under the employ of the LA Kings. John Ziegler, who's running the NHL at this point, expels Pat Quinn from the National Hockey League pending an investigation. and they end up allowing Pat Quinn to take over as general manager in Vancouver, leaving LA, which was a messy process. And I remember that being on the news every night. Just the whole Pat Quinn thing, it was bonkers, because yeah, it looked like he had signed a contract with the Canucks before he actually left the Kings. So what John Ziegler did was he barred Pat Quinn from being a head coach or coaching in the NHL, until I think it's 1991. So he basically banned him from being a coach for a few years. And yeah, just one of those things where, and I remember thinking at the time, why didn't the Canucks just wait? Why didn't Pat just wait? But anyways, there you go. January 22nd of 1987, a blizzard in New Jersey means that you have very few fans in attendance for a game between the Flames and the Devils. 334 came out to watch them play. So that's not very many fans. I think by today's standards, the game would probably be delayed, postponed, because yeah, 334 fans in the arena. Kudos to them for driving through the weather and making it happen. But yeah, that's not very many. Brian Trottier gets fined by the National Hockey League. John Ziegler not happy with him because Brian Trottier decides to write an article for the Hockey News where he criticizes officials for calls they're not making. Thankfully, that's a controversy we don't have in the NHL anymore. Thankfully, that's gone by the wayside. So because he's criticizing officials, he gets fined $1,000 by the NHL via John Ziegler. So yeah, everything's fine. Everything's going great. The Art Ross Trophy that year is won by Wayne Gretzky of the Edmonton Oilers. The Masterton's won by Doug Jarvis of the Hartford Whalers, who is now the NHL's Iron Man. So I think part of the reason he gets the Masterton is because he sets the Iron Man record, which when he retired was at 964 games in a row. So pretty strong record there that, yes, does eventually get passed, but still. The Calder goes to Luc Robitaille of the LA Kings. The Conn Smythe goes to Ron Hextall of the Philadelphia Flyers. We will talk about that in a bit here. The Selke goes to Dave Poulin of the Philadelphia Flyers. The Hart Trophy goes to Wayne Gretzky of the Edmonton Oilers. The Jack Adams goes to Jacques Demers of the Detroit Red Wings. The Norris goes to Ray Bourque of the Boston Bruins, finally. The Lady Byng goes to Joe Mullen of the Calgary Flames. The Lester Pearson Award goes to Wayne Gretzky of the Edmonton Oilers. So the players and the media in agreement that Gretzky's the best at that point and the most important. The Jennings goes to the combination of Patrick Roy and Brian Hayward in Montreal. The Vezina goes to Ron Hextall with Philadelphia. So Hextall had himself a year. The All-Stars in the league that year, your number one center is Wayne Gretzky of the Oilers. Your number two center is Lemieux of the Pittsburgh Penguins. I'll take a moment because I know you're all surprised. On the left side, Michel Goulet of the Quebec Nordiques' first team, and Luc Robitaille of the LA Kings' second team. On the right side, Jari Kurri of the Oilers' first team. Tim Kerr of the Philadelphia Flyers' second team. That was the first career video I did, was on Tim Kerr. I believe that was the first career video. I know that was the first THG Hall of Fame induction, put it that way. Tim Kerr, very underrated goal scorer. And it's sad we don't talk about him more, but again, injuries, right? On the blue line, Ray Bourque of Boston on the first team alongside Mark Howe of the Philadelphia Flyers. On the second team, Larry Murphy of the Washington Capitals and Al MacInnis of the Calgary Flames, second team All-Stars. In net, Ron Hextall of the Flyers is your first team All-Star, and Mike Liut of the Hartford Whalers, second team All-Star. He helps drag them to that first place finish in the Adams division. So your leading scorers, Wayne Gretzky leads the way again. Act surprised. 79 games, 62 goals, 121 assists for 183 points. Pedestrian totals. His 121 assists would barely have won the scoring title that year. Jari Kurri, 79 games, 54 goals, 54 assists, 108 points. Mario Lemieux, 63 games, 54 goals, 53 assists for 107 points. Mark Messier, 77 games, 37 goals, 70 assists, 107 points for him. Doug Gilmour in St. Louis, 80 games, 42 goals, 63 assists, 105 points. Dino Ciccarelli in Minnesota, 80 games, 52 goals, 51 assists, 103 points. Dale Hawerchuk in Winnipeg, 47 goals, 53 assists, 100 points in 80 games. Michel Goulet, 75 games, 49 goals, 47 assists, 96 points. Tim Kerr in Philadelphia, 78 games, 58 goals, 37 assists for 95 points. Ray Bourque in Boston, 78 games, 23 goals, 72 assists, 95 points. And in net, well, your leader in wins was Ron Hextall that season for Philadelphia. 37, 21, and 6 record. 902 save percentage, 1 shutout. Any save percentage above 900 is pretty darn good at that point. Mike Liut in Hartford, 31, 22, and 5 record. 885 save percentage, 4 shutouts. Mike Vernon in Calgary, 30, 22, and 1 record. 883 save percentage, 1 shutout. Andy Moog in Edmonton, 28, 11, and 3 record. 881 save percentage, no shutouts. So we get to the playoffs, and again, it's now best 4 out of 7 in the first round. Winnipeg beats Calgary 4-2. So some momentum for Calgary, some momentum and excitement for Winnipeg, I should say. Calgary's out in the first round, and that's after going all the way to the final the year before. Edmonton beats LA 4-1 in the other Smythe Division matchup. Detroit sweeps Chicago 4 straight. Toronto beats St. Louis 4-2. So again, Toronto's the low seed here, and they knock out the number 1 seed. That's second year in a row they did that. So again, as underdogs, Toronto performs pretty well in the playoffs in the 80s. The Islanders beat Washington in 7 games, which includes that marathon Easter epic, which, LaFontaine gets that shot. Bob Mason can't see it, doesn't save it. Kelly Rudy's your winning goalie there. Philadelphia beats the Rangers 4-2. Montreal sweeps Boston 4 straight because it's a bad matchup for Boston. Quebec beats Hartford 4-2 in a matchup that fans would love to see right now. Hartford and Quebec, yes, bring it on. Whalers and Nordiques. All right, your division finals. Edmonton sweeps Winnipeg 4 straight, so the excitement in Winnipeg doesn't last. Detroit beats Toronto 4-3. So again, Toronto, really tough out in the playoffs. They almost get to the conference final for back-to-back years, in that they were 1 game short of the conference final the year before as well. And then out east, Philadelphia beats the Islanders. That takes 7 games as well, so tough series there. And Montreal beats Quebec, which also takes 7 games. So while Edmonton is sitting pretty and they have all that rest, the other divisions, it's a dogfight in that second round. And that's why we love the divisional playoffs, don't we? So we get to the conference final. It's Detroit and Edmonton. And I remember rooting for Detroit just because I was like, it'd be fun to see Detroit get to the final. The Oilers have been there before, but yeah, this didn't go very long. Detroit does win game 1 in Edmonton 3-1, and then Edmonton wins out from there. 4-1 at home. They go into Detroit. They win 2-1 and 3-2, and then they win 6-3 at home. So Edmonton's numbers, not where they were a few years ago when it comes to offense in the playoffs, but they're much better defensively, so that it balances out. Out east, a bit more difficult of a time for Philadelphia with Montreal. They beat Montreal 4-3 in the first game in overtime. Montreal wins the second game 5-2. Then they go home. Philadelphia wins both games in Montreal by scores of 4-3 and 6-3. And then Montreal wins in Philadelphia 5-2 to stay alive in the series. Philadelphia beats Montreal in game 6, 4-3. That series featured some violence. Just going to say, Philadelphia wins 4-2, but it was a violent throwback, that series, on warm-ups. So, the warm-up brawl, anyways. But at any rate, yeah, it's kind of a fun series between Philadelphia and Montreal because it's always more fun when teams don't like each other. And the dislike between these teams would continue in subsequent playoffs. But at any rate, in the Stanley Cup final, it's Philadelphia and Edmonton for the second time in 3 years. And Philadelphia gives a little more of a fight than they did the last time out. So Edmonton wins both games at home by scores of 4-2 and then 3-2 in overtime. But Philadelphia wins at home 5-3 in game 3. Edmonton wins in Philadelphia 4-1 to go up 3-1. Edmonton then loses at home in game 5, 4-3. And Philadelphia wins at home 3-2 to force a game 7. But in that game 7, the Oilers win at home 3-1. So it is a 7-game series there. A lot of 7-game series in that playoffs. In general, really good series. And Ron Hextall, again, does end up getting the Conn Smythe Trophy because he was the reason Philadelphia was in the final and that it went to 7 games. Wayne Gretzky had 2 goals and 9 assists in that final. Yari Curry had 5 goals, 4 assists. Paul Coffey, 2 goals and 4 assists. Glenn Anderson, 4 goals and an assist. Mark Messier had 2 goals, 3 assists. Grant Fuhr, .917 save percentage. So again, Moog was pretty good during the regular season, but Fuhr takes over in the playoffs. Things are going to fall apart between Moog and the Oilers soon. Brian Propp has 4 goals and 5 assists in that final for Philadelphia. Pelle Eklund, 1 goal and 7 assists. Rick Tocchet, 3 goals and 4 assists. And Ron Sutter had 4 assists in that final as well. Ron Hextall, a .903 save percentage in that final against the high-flying Oilers. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts on the 1986-87 season in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe in the event you've not done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.